Hey, I'm Kern. Welcome back to the Build It Basement. Today we're going to talk about the Stealthburner. We're going to start building that thing. We're going to talk about Revo nozzles. We're going to talk about the Revo assembly. We're going to talk about how to mount the Revo and kind of the components that go into a Revo and why that's so important. We're going to talk a little bit about Bowden tube and talk about the different brands and things like that. And finally, I'm going to give you a tip I call the Bowden funnel. So stick around and check it out.
The hot end for our Stealthburner for our Voron Trident. That starts off with some ducts and some other parts. And identifying the parts. So on the GitHub, which is where you should get your manual, you should get your parts unless you're doing modded parts. But I always suggest to a first-time builder to kind of follow the manual as closely as possible. We're not exactly following the manual, but I've built in a couple printers in the past few years. So they're talking about here how to identify your parts, because you're going to want to print the right parts for the parts that you have. Yeah. Because you can print different parts for the parts you have, but you may not necessarily be able to get the parts you have for the printed parts you may be printing. All right, so this ERV, which is the same as listed here, is basically for the Revo. And it's listed here as ERV. And it's also listed on the bottom side right here as ERV. It's kind of hard to read down there. And they're also showing us a notch corner here, because of Clockwork 1 versus Clockwork 2. Don't build a Clockwork 1. Let's see here. I think I have a Clockwork 1. Why, yes, I do. This is a Clockwork 1, completely different than Clockwork 2. The Clockwork 2 is a huge improvement over Clockwork 1 as far as I'm concerned. This is much heavier. It's just, yeah. I think you can do much better than that. So do not build a Clockwork 1, build a Clockwork 2. And basically what the differences are is your mounting points and your openings here for your hot end, how that goes in there. So that's what that is. And we're going to start us off today with, I'm going to talk about some Revo parts in a minute, but we're going to put in some heat certs. Heated inserts, and talk about these a bunch of times, so I'm not going to talk too much about the actual inserts. We're going to put them in though. And two of them we're really not going to be using, but I will put them in anyways, just in case down the road we decide using those. These two right here, then put them in second to the first two I put in. Those are usually to install an accessories such as an accelerometer. I'm going to drop my chair down so I can come more to eye level with this. I know it looks funny, but you guys see what I'm doing. There we go. And you want these basically flush or just slightly below the surface. You shouldn't feel them when you run your finger across. Maybe feel the heat from them, but that's about it. And that's a generalization for all heat inserts. There you go, like so. Let's see if there's some more we got put in here. Put this aside. We'll leave it plugged in for now. I don't recall. Adjust my chair. Get back up here. Here we're talking about the Revo and the different parts of the Revo. So let's talk about that a little bit, because the Revo is kind of interesting. It's come out in the past year and a half, 2 years or so. And it's a great concept. It's kind of a pioneer concept that E3D came up with. And that was basically to make the heat break and the actual nozzle one piece, with the hopes that changing out your nozzles would be a lot easier, which it really is. Negative to it, the nozzles cost more. The positive to it makes it a lot easier to do the changes and things like that. Now, the nozzle portions of these, this part right here, these are actually patented by E3D So they're supposed to only be made by E3D, or if somebody licenses that. The cold side, or the cool part of the actual extruder, now that's a little different. That's actually not patented, and it can be manufactured by other people. So that's that. So on top of those two parts, you actually have your heater block too. This is actually a 60 watt unit, so this is made for a little bit higher flow. It comes in a 60, and I think the other one's a 40. So what you can do is you can couple up a 60 watt high flow, and you can couple that up with a high flow nozzle. The way to tell a high flow nozzle versus a standard nozzle is a ring around the actual nozzle. It doesn't show up on the normal flow. And you can also peel back this silicone ring around the side here, and you'll see it'll end up an HF listed on it on the inside of that. So that's the way you do it. Now inside of here, to make this high flow, what they've done is actually have a piece inside of it, so your filament comes down, it gets separated out and kind of broken up into smaller pieces, so it can kind of melt a little bit more quickly. So you couple that along with a 60 watt, you get yourself a pretty decent printer in terms of how fast you can print. Probably more than enough for the average guy. You're not going to set, you know, speed benchy world records or anything like that, but you'll do pretty good. So let's put this together real quick, I guess. I mean, I'm going to do it with the high flow. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put our high flow nozzle in, like so. Just right, there we go. And we're just going to kind of twist that on. Spring provides some pressure on that, like that. And then there we go. Now at one point when we do put this together, when we're getting closer to actually mounting this, oh, one more thing, this is the Obsidian version of the nozzle, and basically it has a special coating on it to make it a little bit more robust in terms of dealing with some of those filaments, carbon filled, glass filled, or even glow in the dark type filaments, things like that. That's why that one's black, in case you were wondering. So yeah, so there's that, and we're gonna have to bend this at some point, but they're not mentioning that quite yet. So nope, here we go. They're gonna talk right here about wire routing, and then we're going to be bending this. So let's go ahead and bend this now. We'll do it, and what I suggest you do is grab it with something near the base, nothing that cuts, but just something to hold it, and then you're going to gingerly kind of hold and bend at the same time to a shape kind of like that. I should get you pretty close to where you need to be. Now if you're concerned about you know, breaking or whatever, you can go in here and you can do a resistance test on the thermistor, and then if you want to really go crazy, you could, you know, heat up the thermistor by applying a soldering iron to the hot end. You should get resistance change, and on the actual heater you should be able to put that on a resistance as well, or a continuity, and be able to see that as well. So chances are pretty slim, as long as you don't try to over ream on that or bend that too far, but you do need to bend it to get it in properly. So we'll let that be known. All right, so this assembly is pretty easy. It comes down to basically just taking part A and mounting it to part B. So like that. Right, so we're gonna put this in first. And fit it in there. Something like that. We can pull this wire covering up a little bit further. So we're looking for that situation right there. And we're going to put this over here, and this is actually going to cover up those wires. So I want something that looks like this. Screw these in. And that's not really holding it in place, but it kind of sort of is. More so than I thought it did. But anyways. And now, where are, yep. We got to get our additional screws here, because next up is our M3x8s, which are actually going to connect two into the front portion of this with the actual basically the blower where the ducts are, and two into the rear, which is basically going to connect to what would be the X carriage, but isn't on ours because we're using that aluminum thingy. So could get that in there. And we'll give that a little bit of an extra tweak on there. I don't suggest thread locker on this because this is going to get hot, and if you put thread locker on it, you may never get it out. Not that you should really have to get it out, but just wouldn't suggest it here. There we go. Nice solid single piece here, all together. Flush there, good there. That hot end's in there nice and tight, and these are in there where they need to be for wiring. All right. That leaves us here with a piece of PTFE tube. Now, PTFE is a certain type of plastic, and there are tons of different PTF tubing out there. When I say tons, I mean there's high quality, low quality, there's clear, there's blue, this is Capricorn, which is probably the most famous brand. This is actually Capricorn right here, this darker blue. Then you have two differences with the inner versus the outer diameter. Let's see if I can find a difference here. Yeah, so it's not really going to show up on camera very well, but some tubing has a smaller inner diameter than other tubing, and what you want to do is basically use them where they need to be. Now on this, because you're basically trying to get your filament to be exactly where you want it to be in terms of in your extruder or through your extruder and into your hot end, my suggestion is that you use a PTF tube that has a relatively shallow or thin inner. And I'm going to cut a piece of this Capricorn, which I said again is a high quality PTFE tube. You may not get Capricorn with a kit, you probably won't. Others may just be fine, but I have this, so I'm going to use it. And I also have a little cutter here that I'm going to use that ensures that I get a nice flush cut. But you can also use a straight razor blade and cut it that way. Just make sure you don't crush the tube too much. So we're going to put our PTFE tube in there, and what that looks like here is we have a nice flush section here. I'm going to straighten it out a little bit. We're going to insert it, and it should go down there nice and tight. It should basically be flush up against the cold end of the hot end. Sounds funny, but trust me. And then they're saying we need to have about 11 millimeters sticking out, so we're going to measure that. And some people aren't aware of this little thing, but we'll check this out real quick. We'll set this to 11. Get the screw, and we have this down here. That will give us our 11. And what I will do is get it where I need it. I'm going to try to do a little score into it, right where that 11 is. Made a little mark in there, might be hard to see on camera, but I can see it. What I'm going to do, put my old man glasses on, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually just chop straight down a nice, good razor blade. And that's pretty straight. And see if it goes in there, and then I'm going to remeasure it again. It's ever so slightly more, I mean, ever so slightly more than 11. So I'm gonna call that good. Now, here's a trick, pro trick, whatever you want to call it, a suggestion. So what I like to do when I'm doing this is, because this right here, this particular PTFE tube is pretty close to the 1.75 that our filament is, which is a good thing because it's going to ensure that we get this exactly where we want our filament, so it can go into the hot end. As you can see, when I put that in, it goes straight in. But when it comes into this tube, wouldn't it be nice if there was a little bit of a funnel shape there? So what we're going to do is we're actually just going to put a X-Acto knife in. I'm going to rotate it. I'm just going to try to cut a little bit of a funnel type shape in this PTFE tube. I'm going to blow it out. Now, one thing you want to make sure is any flakes of this PTFE that I manufacture while I'm doing this, you don't want those to stay in the tube, because the reason we're using this type of tube is because of how robust it is against heat. Very slick plastic, but it's also very good at high temperatures. Looking at, look through it, see a little bit come through, so I'm just going to use my filament here that I have, and kind of just make sure there's nothing in there. Make sure we're clear. And another thing you can do too, if you want, is to basically use a little drill bit. I don't recall what size would be best, but yeah, 3/32 if you're in the States, here at the top would work pretty good. And then you're going to want to go down to 5/64, I think is, yeah. And that should be able to clean that out pretty good for you. And you can buy a set of metric drill bits if you like. I do not have metric drill bits. All right, so that's cleaned out. And it is funneled out. Make sure we got nothing left in there. I think we're good. Yep, we're good. All right, so now that I have that little funnel type shape, so I got my exact shape on, my exact circle on the far end, and my funnel type shape on this end. It's only a minor amount of funneling, but it makes it so that when this goes in, if it comes in just slightly off, it's going to still make it in, versus, on the other side, where if it goes in, if it's just a little bit off, it's going to catch on that. So that can kind of give you some headaches, but doing a little funnel on one side kind of helps you with that. So that's what I like to do. All right. And 11 millimeters there. And that's it for the hot end portion of this. So that is a pretty easy part to do. Nice, easy, done deal. Yeah.